On August 9th, we're going to be getting another UFC Apex card, this time headlined by Roman Dolidze and Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. On paper, this card is not great, but like I talked about last week, sometimes these are the cards that end up being very exciting. I actually think the main event is somewhat interesting. Like, it is kind of like your standard Apex middleweight main event. Seems like we get a lot of those, but stylistically, I do think it's an interesting matchup. There are some interesting prospects throughout the rest of this card. So I'm going to be doing my full card breakdown, giving my predictions for every single fight, who I think wins, and how they get it done. There's also going to be timestamps in the description. You guys want to jump around to specific matchups. That is totally cool. Drop your picks down below in the comments. All I ask is that if you enjoy the video, hit the like button and subscribe. But starting off here on the early prelims, we have Gabriella Fernandez taking on Julija Stoliarenko. For Fernandez here, she's actually coming off very impressive back-to-back wins that I think are both going to age very, very well. So she had the club and sub against Kong Wang. I think Kong Wang is going to be a very solid player in this weight class. And then she also picked up a split decision win against Carly Judice, who's really kind of broken out over her last two fights, found back-to-back finishes. Fernandez has pretty solid jiu-jitsu, somewhat limited wrestling where she's not really able to get to that grappling consistently, only 18% takedown accuracy, but then she's also struggled getting control grappled in her two UFC losses. On the other side here with Stoliarenko, she has a 2-6 UFC record. Those two wins are both by armbar. I just don't really think she's UFC caliber. Like, she has been finished by Luana Carolina and Chelsea Chandler. For both of those women, that is their only time finishing anyone within the UFC. That's not great. She doesn't really have anything on the feet. She's kind of takedown or bust. So I think Fernandez is just the much better overall fighter. Obviously, the concern is that she gets taken down and submitted, but I do think she's going to be good enough defensively to stop that. And on the feet, I do think she's just a lot better. I think Fernandez is actually going to be able to put a pace on her, kind of pull away, and I think she finds a late round 3 finish. I'll go like ground and pound TKO. I think that could be set up with the striking, or I think she could, have some grappling success and find a finish like we saw against, I think it was Luana Carolina, who finished her pretty late in their fight. Then we have actually kind of a fun matchup here between Uros Medic and Gilbert Urbina. Medic is just straight up kill or be killed. He has a 10-3 record, 8 wins by knockout, 2 by submission. He has never gone to decision in his pro career. He has a 4-3 record in the UFC. 2 of his losses against very, very high level of competition, Miktabek Oralbai and then Jalen Turner. His last fight was rough though. Decent matchup, stylistically was going to be a striker versus striker matchup. He got nuked in 31 seconds by Puna Soriano. So Medic is a pretty well-rounded striker. He hits hard, has very good kicks. You're just hoping the chin's kind of recovered from that most recent loss. On the other side with Urbina, he has been very inactive. He made his official UFC debut off of Tough in 2021. He's only had 3 fights since then. He does have a pretty long frame for the weight class, 6'3" with a 75-inch reach. He's going to want to mix things up here. I just think it's clear he's at a pretty extreme physicality, disadvantage compared to a lot of his opponents. I also don't think he has the best durability. He was KO'd by Tresean Gore on The Ultimate Fighter. He was just knocked out by Charles Radke. He was submitted, I think it was by Brian Battle in the Tough finale. He came in because I think Tresean Gore was banged up. And so in this matchup, I do expect Urbina to grapple. I think that's going to be, the most optimal way for him to win this fight. Medic has been subbed in 2 of his 3 losses. His takedown defense isn't great. It's down at 50%. But I'm kind of backing the striking, the power of Medic over the grappling of Urbina. And so maybe he lands a few takedowns, can get some control time. But I think at some point on the feet, Medic is going to land that big shot. I'm going to go with Uros Medic round 2 knockout. Then we're going to have another women's fight here with Joselyne Edwards taking on Priscila Cachoeira. I'm expecting there to look like there's a very large size difference between these two women. Priscila Cachoeira is a flyweight who has been thoroughly out-grappled and physically dominated by women who really should be fighting at 115. I want to say it was Jillian Robertson, controlled her very easily, now down at 115. I think Molly McCann also, who's been able to make the cut down to strawweight. On the other side, you have Joselyne Edwards, who's probably too big for 135, where she has missed weight in 3 of her last 6 fights at bantamweight. Priscila Cachoeira does have some legit power, though. 4 of her 5 wins in the UFC are by knockout. She's coming off a round 1 KO against Joselyne Nunes, up at 135, but Nunes is Josiane Nunes, obviously not Amanda Nunes, is one of the shorter 135ers out there. So don't think it's like a great comp to Joselyne Edwards here. And then she just has a major grappling hole where she has been submitted in 4 of her 6 UFC losses. When she gets taken down, she kind of just gets stuck on her back. I can either get submitted or just controlled for long portions of the fight. For Joselyne Edwards here, she has a 6-4 UFC record, actually coming off of back-to-back finishes. She has overall just faced like some pretty low levels of competition, but she's also shown an ability to rack up control time, kind of use her grappling, and I think that's what she's going to do here. So I could see her definitely just winning like a control time decision, but I also think she could find a submission. She has 4 of them in her career. We've seen Priscila Cachoeira be very, susceptible to that. So I'm going to go Joselyne Edwards by round 2 submission. I think maybe Cachoeira kind of wears herself out. She makes a mistake under the pressure, and Edwards capitalizes. Then we have kind of a fun matchup here between Elijah Smith and Toshiomi Kazama. Smith is 22 years old, 8-1, 1-0 in the UFC. Obviously an interesting prospect. He only made his pro debut in 2022 and, has already picked up a win within the UFC. He's still very raw, but has some fun tools, can push a solid pace, has a big frame for the weight class. He's very explosive, has showcased some grappling upside in his Contender Series fight, and then also in his debut. In those 2 matchups, he has landed 8 total takedowns. On the other side with Kazama, I just don't really think he's super UFC caliber. He's had 3 fights in the promotion. He was knocked out in 33 seconds. I want to say it was to Rinya Nakamura, dropped twice, just super early on. Then he was knocked out in the first round, and then he did pick up a submission win, but it was against another opponent who I just don't think is UFC caliber. His wins outside the UFC are not great. I think he had a probably somewhat unlikely KO win on the Contender Series that got him into the UFC. But the chin is just not great. He's been dropped 4 times in 3 fights. He was dropped in that fight, even the one that he won in the same round where he ended up finding the finish. He does have a very grappling-heavy style, but the wrestling just hasn't translated. Only 12% takedown accuracy. On the feet, he's pretty reckless, he's hittable, and also he's proven to, not have an amazing chin. And so I think Smith is going to win this fight. I'll go round 1 knockout. I do think he's just much better on the feet. I think he's going to hit harder. I think he's going to find the shot, and I think he gets the knockout in the first. Then I believe this is up at 205. We have Julius Walker taking on Raffael Cerqueira. For Walker here, he had a split decision loss in his UFC debut. Pretty impressive performance. Debuting against Alonzo Menafield is not an easy fight, and you could have made a case that he did win that matchup. He has a 6-1 pro record, 4 wins by knockout, 2 wins by submission. Big frame, 6'4", 81-inch reach. He's primarily a grappler. He does have those 4 knockout wins, but they're pretty much all ground and pound finishes where he's using his wrestling and then landing shots on the ground. For Cerqueira, he actually fought on the same card as Walker and was knocked out in the first round for the 2nd time in his UFC career. He's been KO'd by Ibo Aslan and Modestas Bukauskas. Pre-UFC, he was 11-0 with 8 knockouts, 2 submissions, had kind of run through his competition. Then he gets to the UFC and he's been nuked 2 times in the first round. Now, I don't think Walker is the same type of KO threat as an Ibo Aslan or even a Modestas Bukauskas. I just think he's the way better fighter. So I think he's going to get his grappling going. Maybe he doesn't just starch him on the feet, but I think he ends up finding a finish in the second round. I will go with Walker by round 2 knockout. Then at middleweight, we have a matchup between Eryk Anders and Christian Leroy Duncan. CLD's had mixed results so far in the UFC, 4-2 UFC record. He is a pretty big middleweight. He fights from range, manages range well, throws some creative kicks, kind of got a fun, somewhat funky style, has been a little too patient, I think, especially in his last fight. There were windows for him to find a finish, and he just didn't really go for it. In his 2 UFC losses, he has been out-grappled, so potential weakness there. For Eryk Anders, he is coming off a ground and pound finish against Chris Weidman, obviously a very diminished version of Chris Weidman. I think he is going to look to grapple in this fight. He's racked up some solid control time in his last 4 wins, but he does only have a 24% takedown accuracy. He's also getting up there in age. He's 38 years old. He's been dropped in 3 straight fights and not against crazy elite competition, like a very old Chris Weidman, a Jamie Pickett, a Marc-Andre Barrios. So this does kind of feel like more of the rising prospect versus fading veteran. And so I will be picking Christian Leroy Duncan here. Although he, had somewhat of a lackluster previous fight, didn't really look for the finish, I do think he finds the knockout in this matchup. I'm going to go CLD KO in the second round. Then in this next fight, kind of a fun matchup here down at bantamweight, we have Miles Johns taking on Jean Matsumoto. Maybe not super fun stylistically, but I do think it'll be interesting to see Matsumoto again. One of the better prospects in the weight class. He has a 16-1 record. His only loss was his last fight, which is where he stepped up on short notice and lost a very close split decision to Rob Font. Like, it's very possible he wins that fight, and he's now established in the rankings at this point in his career. So he is now 2-1 in the UFC. He's capable on the feet, but his best trait is his grappling. We did see him get that going against Rob Font. For Miles Johns, he is just kind of a tough out. He has a 6-3 UFC record. He's kind of a frustrating guy to fight because he does fight relatively safe. Going to have a lower output. He's very defensively responsible. Tough to really hit clean. He's going to want to wrestle, but he just hasn't had a ton of success there. Only a 20% takedown accuracy. In this matchup, I just think John Matsumoto is better across the board, so I'm going to pick him by decision. Then at featherweight, we have a fun matchup between Andre Fili and Christian Rodriguez. Andre Fili is coming off a disappointing performance against Melquizael Costa. Just some really questionable takedown defense. Got guillotined when he probably shouldn't have been. And he's just been on this weird stretch where he has been unable to go on a win streak or a losing streak, where he has not lost or won back-to-back fights since 2019. He's primarily a striker, but is willing to mix in the grappling in certain matchups. Probably don't think that this is one of them. And then outside of the Lucas Almeida KO that he picked up, his last 7 fights have either him just been getting finished very early on in round 1, like his most recent fight. You had the Dan Ige fight, the Joe Anderson Brito knockouts. And then the other ones have just been these very close, very competitive fights that could go either way. You've got the Cub Swanson fight. The Nathaniel Wood was also very close. And so he's kind of just struggled to pull away as of late, while also having the downside of getting finished early. On the other side here for Christian Rodriguez, he's actually also coming off of a loss to Melky Costa, that one by decision. And funny enough, Andre Fili might just pick up the win because he's not some sort of highly touted prospect that Christian Rodriguez has to go up against. In his last 6 fights, he has wins against Austin Bashi, Isaac Dolgarian, Cameron Simon, and Raul Rosas. All 4 of those dudes were pretty highly touted prospects, all of them undefeated, and Christian Rodriguez went in there and took every one of their O's. On the downside, though, of those 2 fights he lost in the last 6, he was submitted by Julian Erosa, and then he lost a decision to Melky Costa. So it's these elite prospects, he just turns them away. Then some of the more established veterans hasn't been able to get over the hump. He's going to be tough. He's very durable. He's never been dropped in the UFC. He's only been finished 1 time in his career, and that was the Julian Erosa Gilly. He has very good cardio, has the ability to wrestle, himself. I guess the issue here with C-Rod is he does just have limited finishing upside. So Andre Fili a lot less durable, but I do think he's a little bit more dangerous. Hits a little bit harder. I just trust C-Rod's ability to mix things up. He does have a pretty good track record in these very competitive fights. Like we've seen, right? He gets beat up in round 1 by Dolgarian, comes back. I think he drops round 1 to both Simon and Raul Rosas and Austin Bashi, I think. And then he's able to come back, win the second and the third round. He definitely gets better as the fight gets later. So I think he is going to pick up this win by decision. I will say I'd love to see Fili get a win. Big fan of him, but objectively, I do have to pick Christian Rodriguez. Then we have a women's matchup here down at 115 between Iasmin Lucindo and Angela Hill. Lucindo is coming off a very, very rough performance against Amanda Lemos. This was kind of like her push up the rankings, and she lost a decision. So a full 15-minute fight where she landed 4 total significant strikes. It was a tough watch just altogether. It was not a great performance from her. And she is pretty reliant on her grappling, and it has been effective against the likes of Marina Rodriguez, Karolina Kowalkiewicz, Polyana Viana. But those women aren't necessarily the poster children for good takedown defense. And she was in a very close fight against Marina Rodriguez, who's kind of known as someone that you can pretty easily grapple, take down, control. For Angela Hill, she is still picking up wins at 40 years old. There was a stretch in 2021 to 2022 where she was on a 3-fight losing streak. At that point, she's 37 years old. Kind of seems like she's on the downturn. Since then, she has won 5 of her next 7 fights. She actually won a close decision in her most recent matchup against Ketlin Souza. I actually think it might have been one of her close split decisions that she maybe shouldn't have won, but eventually things are going to work out for her because she has had a lot of very questionable decisions go the other way. She's going to fight at a very high pace. She has good cardio. I think she's shown some solid grappling improvements, both offensively and defensively. And she's just a dog. She's not going to quit on herself. I actually am going to be backing the underdog in this matchup. I do think we're going to see Lucindo try to grapple. I think she's going to have some success. I think she's going to land some takedowns. I just don't trust her to completely hold down Angela Hill. And we even saw in the Tabitha Ricci fight, she pretty much dropped the first round getting out grappled and then was able to come back and be very competitive in rounds 2 and round 3 to the point where you could have conceivably, scored a fight for Angela Hill. So she's the dog. I think she's going to pull out the decision. It'll be interesting to see, but I do think she gets this one done. Then I believe this is the co-main event. We have Steve Erceg taking on Ode Osbourne. So Steve Erceg has gone from a somewhat tough matchup against Alex Perez to, in my opinion, a much tougher matchup against Hyun Sung Park, even if he's less known. I think he's just a really high-level prospect. I want to say I listed him as the best flyweight prospect in a video I did probably a month ago. So I have been in on him. I have been high on him. I thought that was a tough fight for him, especially you go from 3 super high-level fighters to then potentially the best prospect in the weight class to now I think a much easier fight against Ode Osbourne with, I think, Perez had to pull out. You have Hyun Sung Park, who stepped up, but then got thrown into the Tetsuro Taira main event. So Steve Erceg is on a 3-fight losing streak, but really against the best of the best. Pantoja, Kai Kara France, Brandon Moreno. He's a slick striker, proven cardio. I think he's got some solid fight IQ. I still remember that Pantoja fight. He's been the one guy in these title matchups that has been able to kind of counter the blitzes of Pantoja with elbows coming in, and he did cut Pantoja in that matchup. That's something we saw Davis and Figueiredo do against Pantoja and had some success. So clearly he's got a smart team around him, even though he is kind of on a tough stretch here. I also think he has some underrated grappling upside, where 6 of his 12 wins are by submission. It's just not something he's gone to a ton within the UFC. Then for Ode Osbourne, he has a 5-6 record in the promotion. He's super explosive. He's finished 3 of his 5 UFC wins, and he's very dangerous early on. Round 1, if you're cheering for Erceg, which honestly, full transparency, I will be, it's going to be a little bit of a sweat, right? Everything he lands can have fight-ending consequences, but he does start to fade as the fight goes on, as you can see with some of these super explosive guys. He has some questionable grappling. He's been submitted in 4 of his 8 losses. And his takedown defense also isn't great at 65%. So Erceg just needs to not get nuked very early on in round 1. If he can survive the first, I do think it could be smooth sailing after that. I also think he could potentially implement some of the grappling. I think that would be fun to see if he can get that going. So I could see Erceg finding a finish, honestly, on the feet, on the ground, either one. But I'm going to pick him by decision. He's, won a few matches by decision. Obviously, he had the crazy KO against Matt Schnell, but that hasn't necessarily been the baseline expectation. So Steve Erceg by decision. Hope he gets back on track here. And then we have arrived at the main event, Roman Dolidze taking on Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. And to be honest with you guys, when I saw the betting line for this fight with Anthony Hernandez as greater than a 3-1 favorite, I was a little bit surprised. And it's not because I think super highly of Roman Dolidze or that I'm not high on Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. I don't think Dolidze is that great. I do think Hernandez is very interesting in this weight class. I just think stylistically, this isn't necessarily the matchup where you can see Anthony Hernandez just going in there and completely pulling away, right? You can see some matchups at 185 where he's just going to be able to easily out-grapple some of the guys in the top 15. I don't know if this is one of them. Hernandez, obviously a relentless grappler, averages over 6 takedowns per 15 minutes, also very accurate, 45% takedown accuracy. In his last 6 fights, he has landed 39 total takedowns. He's great at racking up control time in a 5-rounder against Michel Pereira, 16 minutes control, 10 minutes against Brandon Allen, 4 minutes against Kopylov. That was an 8-minute fight. 7 minutes against Edmund Shabazian. That was an 11-minute fight. On the feet, he's really nothing special, kind of hittable. Don't think he's the most durable guy, but he's just using it to set up his grappling. He wants to get in the clinch, wants to make the fight dirty. 8 of his 14 wins are by submission, and then he has finished 6 of his 8 wins within the UFC. For Roman Dolidze, I don't really think he has the overall well-rounded skill set to compete with the best of the best at 185, but I do think he has an interesting style to match up against Anthony Hernandez. Roman's nothing special on the feet, but I do think he's going to have the power advantage in this matchup. I'm not sure if there's going to be, a ton of opportunity for him to land these big shots, but like if someone's getting a finish on the feet, I think it's probably Roman compared to Anthony Hernandez. Dolidze is very good in the clinch, and then he's also very good on the ground, which is somewhat frustrating about his style because he is very good jiu-jitsu. He's a fun grappler. The dude just does not force the issue to try to get the fight to the ground, and he's just kind of content to get into these like striking matches that like, I guess he's won some of them, right? Like he's coming off a win against Marvin Vettori, beat Anthony Smith, but I don't necessarily think it's like the path of least resistance or like the most optimal way for him to approach some of these matchups. He also kind of has like weak takedown defense. Like I think it's down at 33%, which is not a good number, but I think he's kind of fine with that because he is very dangerous off of his back. So he went on a 3-fight stretch, a 3-fight win streak against Kyle Daukaus, Phil Hawes, Jack Hermanson. In those 3 fights, he started it off with a knee KO against Kyle Daukaus in the clinch. So blasted a knee where they were in the clinch, got the finish there. Then against Phil Hawes, he gets taken down, he threatens with an armbar, he transitions to a leg lock, he blows Phil Hawes' knee out, then they get back to the feet, and Dan Miragliotta wants to see a dead body, so you have Phil Hawes kind of compromised on the feet, and Roman like nukes him with a 3-punch combination and pretty much like knocks him out with every single shot he landed. Then against Jack Hermanson, he gets taken down, he threatens an armbar, he transitions to an inverted triangle, then he transitions to a calf slicer. Keep in mind, like Jack Hermanson is a very, very good grappler, so then he gets the calf slicer, but then is able to take the back where he has like the leg and the calf locked up. So Hermanson literally can't do anything. Like he can't get up, he can't get out of it, and he just finds the ground and pound finish. So I actually think this fight has the potential for some like fun scrambles, some fun grappling exchanges, like potentially a heavier Aljo Movsar. I don't think it's going to be that great because 185 is just like not the best weight class, but I do think stylistically it's interesting. Now I'm still going to trust the submission defense and the pace of Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, but I do think him being like greater than a 3-1 favorite is somewhat interesting. Like I think Roman's probably the more physically imposing guy. Like I said, on the feet, I do think he hits harder. And then I think in the early rounds, he could be dangerous, especially off of his back, trying to look for submissions. So that is going to wrap it up. Or did I even say the prediction? I said Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, round 4 submission. Like I said early on, I think it's competitive. I think he ends up pulling away and finding a late sub. But that is going to wrap it up for this one. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe, drop your picks down below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.